I've just finished writing a book on the tarot. Looking back, I probably should have written it on paper.
I wanted to do an extra video and something a little bit different this time and talk about my favourite tarot books. These are the books that have really helped me to gain a deeper understanding of the cards, so I thought I'd share them with you. Just before we get going, I've got a couple of caveats to bring up. First of all, this list is in no way exhaustive. There are so many books on the tarot that if I talked about all of them, I wouldn't have time to do anything else. I'm sure there are countless excellent books on this subject that I've never even heard of, so if you've read a book that resonated with you, please let me know in the comments and I'll try and check it out. Also, I wanted to say that there is no such thing as a definitive guide, because we've all got our own personal connections to the tarot that evolves over time. I've said before that our relationship to the cards is as individual as our fingerprint, so no one can tell you how you should interpret them. You might disagree with every single meaning that I've ever put forward on this channel, but that doesn't make your readings any less valid than mine. In Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig, he writes, "The truth is there are no true meanings for the tarot cards. Different authors give different meanings based on the symbolism of the cards and their own backgrounds and training." On a side note, if you're interested in practicing and learning about ritual magic, then you could do a lot worse than starting with this book. It gets you doing magic work in no time at all. Anyway, the point is that in the tarot there is no right or wrong. Something either works for you or it doesn't. Donald Michael Craig goes on to say, so there are no ultimate true meanings for the tarot cards, but if your system is internally consistent, they will be true for you. Finally, these are not listed in order of preference, but rather in the order that I read them in, which was the wrong order, as you're about to find out. Some of these books are exclusively esoteric in nature and have very little to do with actually reading the cards, but if you're just looking for books to get you started, I've included that too. So with all that said, let's crack on with the list.
Could I borrow a book, Mark?
No, you can't. And don't call me Mark.
Number 1, The Key to the Tarot by Arthur Edward Waite.
The Key is the first book I ever read on the tarot and certainly one of the most confusing. Actually, that's not strictly true. This was the first book I ever read on the tarot, the little booklet that comes with the Rider-Waite tarot deck. I remember getting the cards out to do a reading with someone and telling them that the Two of Swords means conformity and the equipoise which it suggests. I'm sure you can imagine the blank stare that I got for imparting that particular nugget of wisdom. Back then I just saw the tarot as something quite fun and interesting, so this was about as useful as that time we tried to put the fool on a sat-nav.
Just keep going forward until you get there.
I'm bringing up the Key because, as I'm sure you all know, Arthur Edward Waite conceived the Rider-Waite tarot, and that deck is probably the reason that most of us are here right now. Painted by Pamela Coleman Smith, it is without any doubt the most recognisable tarot deck in the world, and the one that nearly all modern decks are based on, so naturally I was very interested to see what the original author had to say about it. Now I would say that this is not the right book if you're a beginner and you just want to start reading the cards, as I found out the hard way. However, once I got into ritual magic, this book started to make a little more sense. Slightly. Arthur Edward Waite was a very important occultist, but he wasn't really a fan of divination. He saw the tarot as something far greater. He said the major arcana contained the secret doctrine, and described it as the legend of the soul. That's why the book can be maddeningly obscure and frustrating. You can see it right there on the original front cover, where he says being fragments of a secret tradition under the veil of divination. Even if you look at this as a purely esoteric book, it still seems to speak in riddles a lot of the time. You have to remember that Waite and Smith both came from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a secret magical society from the beginning of the 1900s. As such, he admitted he wasn't revealing the full truth here. He said the guardians of certain temples of initiation, who keep watch over the mysteries of this order, will therefore have no cause for alarm. Also, if you read this book, you'll find that he put most of his energies into talking about the major arcana, while the minor arcana is more of a footnote. I've read that Pamela Coleman Smith was likely given a lot more creative control over the minors, while Waite was more concerned with the trumps. I've said this many times, but I really wish that Pixie had written her own account of the cards, because the meanings given by Waite don't always match the images. However, despite all this, Waite really studied the tradition, history and symbolism of the tarot, and together with Pixie's wonderful illustrations, they both came up with a deck that has inspired generations of tarot readers. For this reason, The Key will always be one of my favourite books on the tarot.
I ordered a book called How to Scam Idiots Online 2 months ago. It hasn't arrived yet. Number 2, 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollock.
Now, I think this is probably my favourite, 78 Degrees of Wisdom, a book of tarot by Rachel Pollock. Here is my battered copy that I've been using for a very long time. I still keep coming back to it. I must have brought at least half a dozen copies and given them away to people over the years. This is the book that inspired me to really look into the tarot. She did an incredible job of taking all the esoteric connections and marrying them up with history, mythology and spirituality in a way that's clear and easy to understand. That counts for a lot with me. One of my favourite examples is her entry on the World card, where she shows how the dancer lines up with the Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. This book goes really deep into the ancient symbolism, but it also draws comparisons to modern psychology to keep it relevant. Saying that, probably the most important aspect of this book in my opinion is the way she connects the interpretations to emotional matters and the situations we find ourselves dealing with all the time. I think she did a fantastic job of taking all this ancient wisdom and presenting it in a way that we can use in our modern lives. I don't think I'll ever stop reading this book.
Why is that book so thick? Oh, it's a long story. Number 3, The Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley.
So we're looking at a different deck with this one, but don't worry, we're coming back to the Wade Smith deck later. Now you may not use or even be interested in the Thoth Tarot. I'll admit that I don't use the Thoth deck for readings. When I first saw it, I found the images to be a little too abstract for my tastes. I think I'd just got used to Pixie's designs, and once I'd started to make associations to her images, it was just too difficult to migrate to a different deck. However, once I started studying it, I absolutely fell in love with the Thoth Tarot. I may not sit down and do a reading with it, but learning about the deck has really helped me to deepen my understanding of the cards and given me another point of view to work with. Aleister Crowley's Book of Thoth was published in 1944, a long time before the actual deck came out in 1969. It goes really deep into the astrological and esoteric correspondences, something that you don't get in Waite's Key to the Tarot. Now, as is generally the case with occult writers who were part of the Golden Dawn, the text can be somewhat obtuse and confusing. There are times when he's talking about a completely different image to the one that actually made it onto the card, and that's caused me no end of headaches when I've been trying to research videos. However, despite all this, I've found some real gems of knowledge in this book, and studying it has been invaluable to my learning, not just for the tarot, but in all my occult studies. Also, and just as with the Key to the Tarot, I'm a big fan of going back to the original designer's writings on the subject, even if those writings aren't always easy to understand.
Excuse me, I'm looking for a book called How to Solve Half Your Problems.
Yes, we've got it.
Good, I'll take 2 copies, please.
Number 4, Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot by Lon Milo Duquette.
So just as Rachel Pollack's book helped me to make sense of Waite's Key to the Tarot, this is the book that demystified Crowley's Book of Thoth for me. From easily my favourite author on the occult, Lon Milo Duquette does an incredible job of making sense of the Book of Thoth and presenting it in a way that even I can understand. Now, you may not use the Thoth Tarot and you may not really care about it, but I still recommend reading this book because it's just loaded with information that will deepen your understanding of the tarot and the occult in general, regardless of which deck you use. Duquette has got this way of writing that I warm to instantly. He's funny and entertaining, but he's also got a depth of knowledge and experience that just draws me in. He is, without any doubt, the biggest inspiration for me starting this channel. This isn't just the ultimate companion to the Book of Thoth, it's an amazing book in its own right.
Just read a book about falling down the stairs. It's a step-by-step guide. Number 5, The Tarot by Paul Foster Case.
Now we're really starting to get esoteric, but don't worry, we're coming back to a practical book soon. The Tarot by Paul Foster Case was my absolute go-to back when I was making Correspondence Corner for the Major Arcana.
Correspondence Corner!
I believe Paul Foster Case was the first author to share the various esoteric connections to the Tarot. These included the positions on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life.
The chariot sits on the 18th path of the Tree of Life between Binah and Geberah.
The correspondences to the Zodiac.
And his zodiac sign is Cancer.
The musical note.
His musical note is E flat.
And the correspondences to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
He corresponds to the Hebrew letter Chet, which means fence.
His Builders of the Aditum Tarot deck was closely based on the Waite Smith Tarot. Look, there's Barry and Eric in front of the Hierophant with their big daft heads. But it also had the corresponding Hebrew letter right there on the card. These connections had been a closely guarded secret of the Golden Dawn up to this point, and his revelations apparently got him kicked out of the Order. I'm massively oversimplifying this because that whole situation could easily be a video on its own, but let's just say he ruffled a few feathers. Anyway, I talked earlier about how Arthur Edward Waite only skimmed over the Minor Arcana, and this book doesn't even bother to talk about it at all, so do bear that in mind. Despite this, Case has become one of the most important figures in the occult, and his tarot book one of the most beloved. If you really want to go deep, then I think The Tarot by Paul Foster Case is essential reading.
I'm looking for a book about Pavlov's dog and Schrodinger's cat.
It rings a bell, but I'm not sure if it's there or not.
Number 6. Llewellyn's Little Book of Tarot by Barbara Moore.
From the wildly esoteric, we return to the world of practical application. This is the book that I wish I'd read first, Llewellyn's Little Book of Tarot by Barbara Moore. As I was saying earlier with Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic, I am a huge fan of anything that gets you working with something as quickly as possible, and this book does just that. I've always found the best way to learn how to do something is to actually start doing it, and the Little Book of Tarot makes that easy. Now, all of the books I've talked about so far have been invaluable to me, but if you're just doing a reading for yourself on whether you should go on a date with the weirdo from the coffee shop, you probably don't want to wade through pages and pages of occult secrets. This book gives you knowledge that you can put into practice straight away. It's even got an instant answer for each card, so there's no excuse to start reading, no matter how much of a newbie you are. I would say that if you're a beginner and you've got a deck and a copy of this book, you're good to go. Sit down, get the cards out and crack on.
My book on clocks has finally arrived. It's about time.
I've got a few honorary mentions before I wrap this up. First is Tarot Correspondences by T. Susan Chang. This book has been a godsend. She's put all the esoteric connections together into tables, so everything's really easy to find, but she also teaches you how to use those correspondences practically. Next is the Grand Eteila Tarot book by Eteila. Regular viewers will know that we have a lot of fun with this one. Who could forget such classics as "We must now tear apart the bowels of the earth," or "Man one is no longer the prince of the universe. We see him vegetate at the sphere of the globe." Now, to be fair, a lot of the silliness in these quotes comes from me taking the original French text and putting it through Google Translate. Eteila was one of the first people to write anything about divining with tarot cards, so I still think it's interesting from a historical perspective, even if it sounds ridiculous at times. Next is your own tarot book, and this is the most important book out of all of them. What you'll find as you keep working with the tarot is you'll develop your own meanings and connections to the cards, and writing those down is one of the most important things you can do. I'm going to make a video on how I put my tarot book together, but all you really need is a notepad and a pen. I've gone for a leather-bound notebook because I'm a bit of a tart. And finally, no book at all. If you're a complete beginner and you haven't got any books, there's still no reason to leave the cards in the box. Get them out, give them a good shuffle, do a nice simple 3-card spread, past, present and future, and just look at the images and make up your own mind about what they mean. It'll probably make more sense than the little booklet that comes with them.
Excuse me, do you have that new book on how to cope with a small penis?
I'm not sure if it's in yet.
Yes, that's the one.
So those are my favourite books on the tarot up to this point. I'm sure I will go on to read many more, and the list will keep growing, but this is where I'm at right now. As I said earlier, if you've got a favourite book that I haven't mentioned, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my level best to have a look at it.
Well, I must admit I'm pleasantly surprised. I had no idea Kippy could even read. May the coming days bring you knowledge, wisdom, and the desire to get the cards out and start reading. Until next time.